On June 27, 1976, Palestinian and German terrorists hijacked Air France Flight 139 on its way from Tel Aviv to Paris. The terrorists landed the plane and its 248 passengers in Entebbe, Uganda, where they were joined by Ugandan dictator Idi Amin's men. Racing against the clock, Israel executed a daring and legendary top-secret rescue mission, Operation Thunderbolt. But was it the smooth operation that is often described? Who were the heroes of the story? What did they each contribute? And how do we remember them? Okay, now before we continue, if you haven't watched our first episode on Operation Thunderbolt, you should check that out and then come back here. But let's take a few steps back to June 27th, the day Air France Flight 139 was hijacked. After landing in Entebbe, the hijackers demanded the release of 53 terrorists, 40 of whom were in Israeli prisons, along with a ransom of $5 million, which is $22 million in today's value. The hijackers also separated Israeli and Jewish passengers from the others. They soon released the other hostages, keeping the 94 remaining Jews and Israelis prisoner. The flight crew of 12 opted to remain with the Jewish hostages as well. Israel was given 3 days, and then the terrorists would begin to kill the hostages. Back in Israel, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and his cabinet had to decide whether to give in to their demands. Now, Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres are two leaders of the same party, but for a majority of their careers, they actually despised each other. So, not surprisingly, they clashed over how to approach the hostage situation. Rabin, methodical and deliberate, decided that if the IDF could not come up with a viable military option, he would have to negotiate with the terrorists to save lives. But Shimon Peres, then Minister of Defense, argued passionately that agreeing to their demands would only encourage future terrorist attacks and would be a dangerous break in Israel's long-standing approach to dealing with terrorism. Rabin, who viewed Peres as an opportunistic schemer, had little patience for what he saw as Peres putting on a show. So he cut him off, telling him to get off his soapbox so that they could consider all options on the table. Peres was persistent though, arguing if we give in to the hijackers' demands, everyone will understand us, but no one will respect us. If on the other hand, we conduct a military operation to free the hostages, it is possible that no one will understand us, but everyone will respect us. But as they approached the deadline, the IDF had not come up with a feasible military option, so Rabin decided to negotiate. Then Israel got an unexpected break. During negotiations, the terrorists agreed to delay the deadline. During this time, Rabin ordered Peres and Chief of Staff Motagor to continue to work out a military plan. Peres assembled a brainstorming team and encouraged them to consider even the most outlandish and far-fetched options. Motagor, who was at first skeptical of the team, called them the Fantasy Council. Ultimately, Peres and his team did come up with a military option. Rabin examined the daring rescue plan with his trained military eye and gave the green light to Operation Thunderbolt. Fortunately, the operation was a stunning success, freeing 102 of the 106 hostages on foreign soil within less than an hour. Sadly, however, by the end of the affair, 4 hostages had lost their lives, along with Operation Commander Yoni Netanyahu, who we'll get to in a minute. Today, over 40 years later, there are still questions about the roles the various leaders played. What went through the minds of the men sitting in the cabinet room? In moments of national crisis, how are tough decisions like these made? Rabin and Peres clearly had very different leadership styles. Rabin saw himself as the one ultimately responsible for the fate of the passengers, and his leadership reflected this. He insisted on determining the risks and statistical probability of success before launching a daring raid. He strongly preferred a military solution, but would not approve one that didn't measure up to his high standards. By turning down the grander and, frankly, more attractive option of a daring rescue mission, and instead agreeing to negotiate with the terrorists, Rabin risked presenting himself as a weak-willed leader. But he was willing to forego his reputation if it meant saving Israeli lives. And when the IDF came up with a plan that Rabin did approve of, he was ready to take the fall, even preparing a resignation letter in the event that the operation were to fail. Others felt that Shimon Peres' leadership played the most pivotal role, including Shimon Peres himself. After all, he had pushed the military option from the start, and he had assembled the brainstorming fantasy council that came up with the rescue plan. In Entebbe diary, Peres argued that his stubborn insistence on a military option forced Rabin to change his mind. He was perhaps more idealistic and visionary, but in a way he had that luxury, not being the one ultimately accountable. Rabin, on the other hand, resented what he considered Peres' opportunism, and in his own memoir, he basically accused him of being all talk. But back to the rescue operation. How did it actually play out? Well, on July 3rd, Israeli commandos traveled 8 hours and 2,500 miles towards Entebbe. Their route took them along the Red Sea, skirting enemy countries. They flew dangerously low to avoid radar detection, at times only 35 feet off the ground, and landed in Entebbe under the cover of darkness. They brought with them a black Mercedes limo, the kind used by Ugandan dictator Idi Amin, along with 2 Land Rovers. Posing as Idi Amin's presidential motor convoy, they drove into the Entebbe airport where the hostages were being held. Following Commander Yoni Netanyahu's famous charge, "Follow me," the commandos stormed the terminal, killing all the hijackers and freeing all but 4 of the 106 hostages in less than 1 hour. Yoni Netanyahu, the charismatic, dashing, Harvard-educated poster child, was killed in the attack and eventually became a national hero. His second-in-command, Major Muki Betzer, took over. The hostages were rescued and flown back to Israel, landing on July 4th, 1976, America's bicentennial, adding to the mythical symbolism of the rescue. With the mission accomplished, the story of Operation Thunderbolt began to take shape. And this story took on another dimension, outshining the Rabin and Peres rivalry. Not everyone agreed on how the story of the operation itself should be told. Competing narratives by Major Muki Betzer and by the family of Yoni Netanyahu struggled for primacy over how the national myth would develop. The more popular story is that Yoni Netanyahu led a flawless clockwork operation and sacrificed his life in doing so. And this story has had actual political ramifications. Yoni's martyrdom was a major factor in bringing the Netanyahu name to center stage and helped pave the eventual career path of his younger brother Benjamin Netanyahu. But Muki Betzer, who was involved in the planning from the very start and who took command after Yoni was shot, tells another story. In his modestly titled autobiography, Secret Soldier, the true life story of Israel's greatest commando, he claims that unlike Yoni, he had been instrumental in planning the operation from the start. And not only that, but according to Muki, the stealth rescue operation almost went awry. In his version, the plan was to drive all the way up to the terminal in their Mercedes and Land Rover decoys and ignore the Ugandan soldiers. But as the Mercedes approached the terminal, Yoni saw a Ugandan guard raise his weapon, and despite Muki's pleas, he went against the plan and opened fire. This created chaos, ruined the element of surprise, almost bungled the entire operation, and cost Yoni his life before the Israelis even stormed the terminal. According to Muki, the rescue succeeded despite this mix-up because the hijackers were clueless and it never occurred to them that the IDF had shown up. However, according to the majority of the commandos who took part in the raid, opening fire on the sentries was in fact part of the plan. According to the Netanyahu family's version of the events, it was Muki who almost bungled the plan when he unexpectedly hesitated on his way to the terminal, later claiming that his gun had jammed. Because of this, Yoni led the charge and was shot by the terrorists from inside the terminal. Of these two rivaling narratives, the official military accounts and the newspapers have generally accepted Muki's version. But interestingly, it is the Netanyahu's version that has taken hold of the world's imagination and become part of Israel's national consciousness. It put Yoni, the elite fighter / Israeli golden child, in Israel's pantheon of martyrs and heroes. And rightfully so. But why did this version take hold? Well, for one, the Netanyahus promoted their account of the raid in several best-selling books. They published his letters under the title Self-Portrait of a Hero, philosophical reflections which have inspired a whole generation of Israelis and Jews around the world. In the book's preface, Pulitzer Prize-winning author Herman Wouk describes Yoni as a philosopher-soldier of terrific endurance, a hard-fibered, charismatic young leader, a magnificent fighting man. All of these things contributed to a larger-than-life image that has taken hold. And a big-budget movie about the rescue operation that generations of Israelis and Jewish summer camp kids have been raised on didn't exactly hurt. When questioned by an army buddy of Muki Betzer about some inaccuracies in the film, the pioneering film director Menachem Golan reassured him by saying, "I'm going to create for you guys an Entebbe you could never have dreamed of." The tale of the rescue restored a sense of shared destiny and fate among all Jews around the world. It brought left and right together in sharing their pride, knowing that Jews, no matter where they were in the world, now had a country to protect them. It was also the West's first major victory in its fight against terrorism, and one that essentially put a stop to hijacking as a chosen method of terrorists. So, while it may be tempting to choose a side, Muki versus Yoni, Peres versus Rabin, the reality is that it took all of these fearless leaders working together to accomplish one of the most daring missions of the 20th century. Ultimately, the story of Entebbe is a complex one. Although the broad contours of the story are fairly clear, some of the finer details are complicated, messy, even contested. But that's the case with history in general, which is always a wrestling match between multiple narratives and points of view. Trying to synthesize it all into one uniform story is rarely productive and only results in a more one-dimensional story, when the truth is more sophisticated and honestly, a lot more interesting. Thanks for watching. See you guys next week.